It was a cold and quiet evening. Alex strolled through the deserted park near his apartment, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. The soft crunch of leaves under his boots and the distant hum of the city were the only sounds that accompanied him. He liked it this way, peaceful and far from the chaos of his everyday life. But tonight wasn't like any other night. A soft, blue glow caught his attention near the old fountain in the park center. At first, he thought it might be the streetlights flickering again, but as he stepped closer, he realized the light wasn't coming from any earthly source. It was floating. A figure emerged from the shadows, illuminated by the glow. He wasn't tall, but his presence felt enormous. His skin shimmered like polished metal, and his eyes, golden, piercing, and entirely alien, fixed directly on Alex. Finally, the figure said, his voice low but resonating like a distant echo, "I've been looking for you for a long time, human." Alex froze. The words felt heavy, their meaning incomprehensible. His heart raced, his instincts screaming at him to run, but his legs refused to move. "Do what?" he stammered. The alien stepped closer, his movements smooth, almost gliding. His gaze never left Alex, as if trying to read every thought in his mind. "You don't understand yet, but you will," he continued. "You are more important than you know." "What are you talking about? Who are you?" Alex demanded, his voice trembling despite his attempt to sound confident. The alien tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. "I am Colin," he finally said, "a seeker from a place far beyond your comprehension. My people are dying, and you, Alex, are the key to their survival." Alex blinked, the world spinning around him. His name. This thing knew his name. He stepped back instinctively, shaking his head. "This is insane. You've got the wrong person. I'm nobody." Colin raised a glowing hand, and the air between them shimmered. A holographic image appeared, an alien world bathed in soft purple light. Its surface cracked and withered, cities reduced to ruins, its skies thick with ash. "This is my home," Colin said, his voice carrying the deep sorrow. "It is dying. And you, human, hold the answer to saving it." Alex's breath caught in his throat. I don't understand. I'm just an artist. What could I possibly do to help a whole planet?" Colin stepped closer, his expression softening. "You are more than you think, Alex. Your ancestors left behind a legacy, a connection to my people that has been lost, until now. You are the link, the only one who can bring hope back to my kind." Before Alex could respond, a sudden movement in the shadows caught his eye. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He turned toward the noise, but it was too late. The first sound of danger pierced the silence. "Run," Colin whispered. Alex sprinted through the park, his heart pounding like a drum. The sound of footsteps, heavier and faster than human, echoed behind him. He had no idea where he was going. He only knew he had to get away. "Turn left." Colin's voice rang in his mind, though his lips didn't move. The words came with an urgency that made Alex obey without question. He ducked down a narrow path lined with overgrown bushes. Ahead, a small clearing opened up, illuminated by the faint light of the moon. Colin suddenly appeared beside him, his movements swift and silent. "Keep moving. They're coming." "Who's coming?" Alex gasped, his lungs burning. "What is going on?" Colin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he raised his glowing hand, and a shimmering wall of light appeared behind them. A loud crash followed, and the ground trembled. Alex glanced back to see shadowy figures pounding against the barrier. "They're hunters," Colin finally said, his voice calm but firm. "They don't want me to succeed, and now they've marked you as a target too." "Me? Why? I don't even know what's happening," Alex shouted, his voice cracking. Colin stopped abruptly, placing a hand on Alex's shoulder. His golden eyes met Alex's, full of intensity. "Listen to me. You have a rare connection to my people, something that has been lost for generations. Without your help, my world will perish." Alex shook his head, panic swirling in his chest. "I'm just a regular guy. I draw pictures, that's it. How could I possibly help save an entire planet?" Colin sighed, his expression softening. "Your ancestors weren't ordinary humans. They were part of an ancient alliance with my kind, a bond that carried knowledge and power. That bond still exists in you, Alex. It's in your blood." The words felt like a punch to the gut. Alex wanted to laugh, to dismiss it all as some bizarre dream. But the sincerity in Colin's eyes made it impossible to deny. "Even if that's true," Alex said hesitantly, "what am I supposed to do? I don't know anything about aliens or saving worlds." Colin straightened, his shimmering figure standing tall against the night. "You don't have to know everything right now. You just need to trust me. Come with me, and I'll show you what you're capable of." Before Alex could respond, the barrier behind them shattered. The hunters, tall and menacing with glowing red eyes, surged forward. Colin raised both hands, creating another shield of light to hold them back. "We don't have time," Colin said urgently. "I need you to come with me now." Alex hesitated for a split second, his mind racing. Then he made his choice. "Fine," he said, his voice trembling. "I'll go with you." Colin gave a nod of approval, and a portal of blue light opened before them. "Step through," he said. As Alex crossed the threshold, he felt a strange warmth envelop him, and the world around him dissolved into light. Cliffhanger. On the other side of the portal, Alex finds himself staring at something breathtaking. A massive spaceship hovering in a starry expanse. The world around Alex shifted in a dizzying blur of lights and colors. One moment, he was standing in the park, surrounded by trees and shadows. The next, he was surrounded by the hum of machinery and the soft glow of alien technology. He blinked several times, trying to adjust to his new surroundings. He stood on a sleek metallic platform, the floor beneath his feet humming with energy. Above him, a high-tech ceiling stretched endlessly, filled with intricate glowing patterns. A soft, blue light bathed everything, creating an atmosphere both strange and calming. It was as if he had stepped into another dimension entirely. Alex's heart still raced from the chaos of the chase. He looked around, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The park, the hunters, the portal, and now this. Colin was standing beside him, his expression unreadable. His glowing eyes studied Alex, but there was a warmth in his gaze now, almost like reassurance. "You're safe here for now," Colin said, his voice echoing softly in the stillness. "But we don't have much time." Alex opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. There were so many questions he wanted to ask. He felt like a rabbit trapped in a maze, with no idea of how he'd gotten here or where he was supposed to go next. "Where am I? What is this place?" Alex finally managed. "This is my ship, the Ether 9, Colin replied. "It's a sanctuary of sorts, a place where my people can hide and plan." "Hide?" Alex echoed. "From who?" "The ones chasing us," Colin said, his voice growing more serious. "There's a faction of my species that believes in domination, not preservation. They want to control humanity, to use you for their own purposes." Alex shook his head, trying to piece it all together. "But I'm just me. I'm nobody special. I don't understand." Colin stepped forward, his eyes now glowing brighter with an intensity Alex had never seen before. "Your ancestors were part of a group that worked with my people. Long ago, we forged a bond, a genetic link. That link was meant to protect both our worlds. Over time, it was forgotten. Until now." Alex's mind reeled. "Wait, so you're saying I'm related to you, like genetically?" "Not directly," Colin clarified. "But your DNA carries the remnants of our connection. The knowledge that could help save my people, save the entire planet, lies within you. You're the key, Alex. For a moment, Alex stood there, speechless. This was too much to take in. He was just a guy who liked to paint and draw. How could he be the key to saving an entire alien race? Colin seemed to sense his confusion. I know this is hard to believe, but you don't have to understand everything right now. All I need you to do is trust me. I need your help. Alex opened his mouth to protest, but then he looked at Colin's face. The desperation, the hope. There was no doubt in his eyes, only certainty. He swallowed hard. Okay, I'll help you. But what exactly do I need to do? Colin nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. It begins with unlocking what's hidden in your DNA. But before we can do that, we have to reach a place called the Sanctuary. It's where the technology that can revive my world is stored. You're the only one who can activate it. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. And these hunters, they'll be after us, won't they? Yes, Colin said, his voice firm. They won't stop until they have you. Cliffhanger. Just then, an alarm blared throughout the ship, a high-pitched warning sound that made Alex's blood run cold. They found us, Colin said, his tone hardening. It's time to move. The alarm blared again, louder this time, sending vibrations through the walls of the ship. Alex's heart raced as he followed Colin down the narrow hallway. The soft glow of the ship's lights flickered, and a series of doors slid open and shut with a mechanical hiss as they passed. They've breached the outer defenses, Colin said, his voice calm but urgent. We don't have much time. We need to get to the escape pods. Alex tried to keep up with Colin's long strides. His mind was still spinning from everything that had happened so far. 1 minute, he was in a park. The next, he was on an alien ship, being chased by alien hunters, and now he was supposed to save an entire planet. It felt like a dream, but the fear pounding in his chest told him it was very real. Escape pods? Alex asked, his breath quickening. Are we leaving? Where are we going? We need to regroup, and there's a place I know where we'll be safe for a while, Colin said, not slowing down. The ship is compromised. We'll be exposed if we stay here. They reached a large metallic door that slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, there were several sleek pods, each one large enough for a person to fit comfortably. Colin stepped into one of the pods and turned to face Alex. Get in. I'll activate the pod's cloaking system. It will hide us from their sensors for now. Alex hesitated for a moment, then climbed into the nearest pod. As soon as he was inside, the door shut behind him with a soft click. The interior was simple but efficient, with a control panel in front of him and soft, cushioned seats. Hang on tight. Colin's voice echoed through the comm system. This won't be a smooth ride. Before Alex could respond, the ship lurched, and the pod shot forward with incredible speed. He barely had time to brace himself as the world outside the small window turned into a blur of stars. For a moment, the sensation was almost exhilarating, the sensation of flying through the vastness of space. But that feeling quickly turned to fear as Alex remembered why they were fleeing in the first place. Colin, are we really safe? Alex asked, his voice shaking. They're going to find us, aren't they? They might, Colin replied, his voice steady. But for now, we have the element of surprise. The hunters won't know where we've gone unless they're tracking us directly. Alex nodded, trying to steady his nerves. He had no idea how to help Colin, how to save his people, or what was really at stake. All he knew was that he couldn't turn back now. The pod jolted again, and Alex grabbed onto the armrests. He glanced out the window, seeing the ship they had just escaped from growing smaller in the distance. They're still following us, Colin said, his voice tight with tension. But we're not easy to track. This ship has a cloaking system, and if we can reach the sanctuary, we'll be able to activate the defense systems and keep them off our trail. Alex clenched his fists. And if we don't? Colin's eyes locked with Alex's through the comm system. Then we'll be caught. and everything I've worked for will be lost. My people will die, and humanity might never know the truth about their connection to us." For a brief moment, Alex felt the weight of what was being asked of him. He wasn't just a witness to something extraordinary. He was part of it. And no matter how scared he felt, there was no turning back. Cliffhanger. Suddenly, a sharp ping echoed through the pod systems. "They've launched a tracker," Colin said urgently. "Brace yourself. We have one shot at this." The pod shook violently, sending Alex's stomach into his throat. He could hear Colin's voice through the comm, but it felt muffled, as if the ship itself was protesting the chaos unfolding around them. "They've locked onto our coordinates," Colin said, his voice tight with tension. "We need to act fast, or they'll track us to the sanctuary." "Do what?" Alex shouted, gripping the armrest harder as the pod jolted again. "We can't outrun them." "We're not going to outrun them," Colin replied. "But we can outsmart them." Alex looked out the window, watching as the stars blurred past them, the endless darkness of space swallowing everything in its path. His mind raced. What did Colin mean by outsmarting them? They were being hunted by an advanced alien faction, and Alex was just, well, a human. He had no special powers, no advanced technology. He was just in over his head. The pod jolted again, a sharp crackle of static coming from the comm system. "We're going to have to make a detour," Colin said, his tone growing more urgent. "There's an old ally of mine, someone who can help us, on a nearby moon. It's risky, but it's our only chance to buy some time." "An ally?" Alex repeated, confused. "Who is it? And how can they help us?" "She's called Sarah," Colin replied. "She's human, like you. A mechanic. A brilliant one. She'll know what to do." Alex's heart skipped. The human. Another ally. He had no idea what to make of it, but if there was even a slight chance that this Sarah person could help, they had to try. "We don't have time to ask questions," Colin added, his voice sharper now. "Just trust me. Get ready." The pod veered suddenly, taking a sharp turn. Alex's body slammed against the side as the craft banked hard to the left, moving into the shadow of a nearby moon. The surrounding space seemed eerily quiet for a moment. Too quiet, like the calm before a storm. "Hold tight," Colin shouted. Alex's pulse quickened. He had no idea where they were going or who this Sarah person was, but something about the urgency in Colin's voice made him realize that they were running out of time. They were on a collision course with something bigger than they could have imagined, and Alex was about to be thrust deeper into the unknown. The moon's surface loomed large through the small window of the pod, a dusty, rocky landscape illuminated by the pale light of distant stars. As they descended, the landscape became clearer, and Alex could just make out the silhouette of a building nestled into a large cave near the moon's equator. "Is that where Sarah is?" Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Colin confirmed. "It's an old hideout of mine. She'll know how to get us to safety. And more importantly, she can help us fix the pod's cloaking system. That will buy us the time we need to get to the sanctuary." Alex nodded, trying to steady his racing thoughts. He had no choice but to trust Colin, to trust that this strange ally could help them. As the pod neared the surface, Alex felt a new sense of urgency. There was still so much he didn't understand, so much that was out of his control. The pod touched down softly on the rocky surface, the quiet hum of the engines slowly dying down. "We're here," Colin said. "Stay close. We don't know who else might be watching." Alex opened the hatch and stepped out onto the cold, barren moon. The air was thin and dry, but he could still breathe. Ahead of them, the entrance to the cave loomed dark and mysterious, but there was a flicker of light from within. "Let's go," Colin said. As they moved toward the cave, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into something dangerous. But for the first time since meeting Colin, he had a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this strange alliance with another human could make the difference they needed. cliffhanger. As they reached the entrance, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, with dark hair and a confident stance. She was human, just like Callan had said, but something about her eyes, the way she watched them approach, made Alex feel uneasy. "Callan," the woman said, her voice cool but knowing. "I wasn't expecting company." The woman stood in the doorway of the cave, her eyes scanning Callan and Alex with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Her posture was relaxed, but her sharp gaze told Alex she wasn't someone to be taken lightly. The way she held herself, confident, calm, and in control, was almost magnetic. Callan took a step forward, his hand raised in a peaceful gesture. "Sarah," he said, his voice warm but serious, "it's good to see you again." Sarah's expression softened slightly at the sound of Callan's voice. She stepped aside, allowing them to enter the cave. "I didn't expect you to be bringing a guest, let alone a human," she said, her tone a bit more playful now. Alex wasn't sure how to react. His mind was still reeling from everything that had happened. The chase, the alien ship, the unknown technology, and now meeting the human who somehow seemed to be involved in this wild journey. Callan glanced at Alex, who was standing just behind him, clearly feeling out of place. "Alex is important. We need your help." Sarah raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Help, huh? With what?" Her eyes lingered on Alex for a moment longer before returning to Callan. "We've been followed. They're tracking us, and we need to fix the pod's cloaking system," Callan explained quickly, glancing at Alex with a hint of urgency. Sarah nodded as if she already understood. "I figured as much. You wouldn't be here unless things were going sideways." She turned, leading them deeper into the cave. "Come on, I've got a workshop set up in the back. Let's get to work." The cave was surprisingly well equipped. Despite the rocky, barren exterior of the moon, inside, the walls were lined with shelves of tools, machinery, and strange devices Alex had never seen before. The air smelled faintly of oil and metal, and the hum of old but functional equipment filled the space. Sarah moved with purpose, walking to a workbench in the far corner and pulling out a few tools. "We'll need to access the cloaking system's core," she said, glancing back at Callan. "It'll take some time, but it's not impossible." Alex watched her, amazed by how confidently she worked. She seemed to know exactly what to do, like this was her territory. He felt a little out of place, unsure of his role in all of this. He wasn't a mechanic or even close. He was just a human who liked to draw. "So, you knew Callan before all this?" Alex asked, trying to make conversation. Sarah glanced over at him, a slight smile tugging at her lips. "Yeah, we've crossed paths a few times." She paused, as if thinking for a moment. "And you're a part of this now. Whatever this is anyway." "I don't even know what's going on half the time," Alex admitted, a bit of frustration creeping into his voice. "I was just living my life. And now I'm supposed to save a planet." Sarah turned to face him, her expression softer now. "You'll figure it out. Callan doesn't ask for help unless he believes you can give it." Alex looked down at his hands, feeling both insignificant and strangely empowered. A part of him wanted to run, to leave this crazy mess behind. But another part, the part that had always been curious and open to new experiences, felt like he couldn't turn back now. Sarah handed Callan a device, a small black panel that flickered with light. "This should buy us some time," she said. "But if they're really tracking us, we'll need to move quickly." Callan looked at her, his golden eyes flashing with gratitude. "Thank you, Sarah. We owe you." Sarah shrugged, as if it wasn't a big deal. "Don't mention it. I've had my fair share of close calls. Besides," she added with a wink, "I like a good challenge." With the device in place, Callan turned to Alex. "We need to move to the next stage of the plan. Sarah can help us here, but the sanctuary is still far from reach. We have to stay ahead of them." Alex nodded, his resolve strengthening. "All right. What's next?" Callan's gaze softened slightly, but his tone was firm. Next, we get back to the ship and finish what we started. Cliffhanger. As they prepared to leave the cave, a loud noise echoed from the entrance. Alex's blood ran cold. Someone, or something, was outside. They weren't alone anymore. The noise grew louder, a series of heavy footsteps approaching fast. Alex's heart skipped a beat as he looked at Callan and Sarah. There was no mistaking it. Someone was out there, and they weren't friendly. Callan's eyes narrowed. They found us. Sarah cursed under her breath, moving quickly toward a nearby shelf. She grabbed a blaster and handed it to Callan. Take this. We'll hold them off long enough for you to escape. Alex swallowed hard. Escape? What about you? Don't worry about us, Callan said, his voice calm but urgent. Get back to the ship, Alex. We need you to stay safe. But before Alex could respond, the entrance to the cave suddenly flung open with a deafening clang. A tall, armored figure stepped inside, followed by two more. Their eyes glowed red, and their faces were hidden behind helmets. The hunters. Alex could feel the tension in the air as they locked eyes. These weren't the kind of beings he wanted to mess with. You can't hide forever, Callan, the leader of the hunters said, his voice cold and menacing. Hand over the human. It's the only way this ends. Alex's legs went stiff, his body frozen in fear, but Callan stood tall, unfazed by the threats. I will never give him up, Callan said firmly. You'll have to go through me first. Sarah stepped forward, holding her blaster with a steady hand. And you'll have to get through me too, she said, her voice low but full of defiance. The hunters laughed, the sound grating against Alex's nerves. You think you can stop us with your toys? The leader sneered. We've been tracking you for light years, Callan. It ends now. Without warning, the hunters raised their weapons. Alex's heart raced. He wanted to run, to hide, but something inside him kept him rooted to the spot. Callan had put his trust in him, and now he had to trust himself. We'll see about that, Callan muttered under his breath. In a flash, Callan dove forward, his body moving with incredible speed. The first hunter fired, but Callan was already moving, dodging the blast and disarming the attacker in one swift motion. The hunter's weapon clattered to the ground as Callan used the hunter's own momentum against him, sending him flying backward. Sarah fired a shot, hitting another of the hunters square in the chest. He staggered but didn't fall. The third hunter advanced, weapon aimed at Sarah, but she was already moving, ducking behind cover and firing again. This time, her shot landed, sending the hunter crashing to the floor. Alex watched in awe. The speed and skill Callan and Sarah showed were unlike anything he had ever seen. This was real. There was no going back now. He couldn't stand idly by. He had to do something. The leader of the hunters growled in frustration, his red eyes burning with fury. He advanced on Callan, his weapon raised for a killing blow. Alex knew if Callan didn't stop him, this would end in disaster. Without thinking, Alex grabbed a nearby rock, throwing it with all his strength at the leader's back. It hit with a sharp crack, and the hunter staggered, momentarily distracted. That was enough. Callan moved quickly, knocking the weapon out of the leader's hand and disarming him in a single fluid motion. The leader fell to the ground, defeated. The cave was silent for a moment as the dust settled. Callan stood over the fallen hunter, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. Sarah looked at Alex, a smirk on her face. Not bad, human, she said, tossing him a wink. Alex blinked, unsure whether to laugh or collapse from the adrenaline coursing through him. I didn't expect that to work. Callan turned toward him, his face serious but a hint of approval in his eyes. You did well, Alex. You've got more in you than you realize. But there was no time to celebrate. The fight had only just begun. We need to move, Callan said urgently. The other hunters will be here soon. Let's go. Sarah nodded, moving quickly toward the back of the cave. "I'll secure the path to the ship. You two get going." Alex followed Colin as they headed for the exit. His mind was still reeling from the fight, but the adrenaline kept him moving. He couldn't help but feel that things were only going to get harder from here. But one thing was certain: he wasn't the same person he had been before this journey started. Cliffhanger. As they reached the cave's entrance, a distant sound echoed from above. The deep hum of an incoming ship. They weren't alone anymore. And this time, it wasn't the hunters. The distant hum of an approaching ship grew louder, its presence filling the air with a quiet, almost ominous vibration. Alex's heart skipped a beat as he glanced up at Colin, who stood motionless, his golden eyes scanning the horizon with intensity. "Colin, what's going on?" Alex asked, his voice tinged with nervousness. The sound of the ship was unmistakable. It was getting closer and fast. Colin's expression hardened. "It's them. The other hunters," he said with grim certainty. "They followed us, but they've also brought reinforcements. We don't have much time." Alex's stomach twisted in knots. He had no idea how he was supposed to help in a situation like this. He was just a normal human, caught in the middle of a war he didn't understand. But Colin and Sarah, two beings who seemed to have everything under control, had put their trust in him. He couldn't let them down now. "Is there anywhere safe?" Alex asked, his voice steady despite the fear rising in his chest. Colin nodded. "There's one place we can go, the sanctuary. It's a hidden location, well beyond their reach. We can activate the technology there and get the power we need to fight back." "Then let's go," Alex urged, looking toward the distant horizon, where the ship was now visible, a sleek, dark form against the pale surface of the moon. Without another word, Colin motioned for Alex to follow him. They hurried toward the rocky cliffside, where a hidden lift awaited. The path was narrow, winding its way through the jagged rock. Sarah moved ahead of them, her hand gripping the blaster she'd used to defend them earlier. As they reached the lift, Colin entered the controls, and the platform began to rise, silently lifting them toward their destination. The wind howled through the cracks in the rock, carrying with it a sense of urgency. "We'll have to move quickly," Colin said as the lift descended. "The sanctuary is deep within the mountains, and we need to reach it before the hunters do." Alex nodded, feeling the weight of the situation settle heavily on his shoulders. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to stand by and do nothing. The lift carried them higher, leaving the surface of the moon behind. For a moment, the view was breathtaking. The stars glittered in the vast expanse of space, and the ship that had been chasing them was now just a tiny speck in the distance. But Alex knew that distance didn't matter. The hunters were relentless, and if they had their way, they would stop at nothing to capture him. As the lift reached its destination, Colin led them down a narrow passageway that twisted and turned through the mountain. The air grew colder, and the walls around them seemed to close in, as if the mountain itself was protecting the sanctuary from the outside world. When they finally emerged into a large chamber, Alex felt a sense of awe. The room was vast, illuminated by a soft, golden light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. At the center of the chamber was a massive control panel, covered in alien symbols and glowing interfaces. "This is it," Colin said, his voice reverberating in the quiet space. "The sanctuary. It's here that we can activate the ancient technology that can save my people." Sarah moved forward, her eyes scanning the control panel. "I'll need a few minutes to get this online," she said. "If we're lucky, we'll have enough time before the hunters catch up." Alex stood back, watching the two of them work. He didn't know much about alien technology, but he could see the determination in their eyes. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something much bigger. Colin turned to him, his gaze softening for a moment. "Alex, you've done more than I could have ever hoped. Without you, I wouldn't have made it this far. This is the moment we've been waiting for." Alex swallowed, feeling a mix of pride and anxiety. "I didn't do much. I was just trying to help." "You've done more than you realize," Colin said quietly. "You've shown us that hope can still exist, even in the darkest times." As Callan and Sarah worked together to activate the technology, Alex couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had happened. He had gone from an ordinary human living a quiet life to a key player in the survival of an alien race. But with that realization came a new sense of purpose. This was bigger than him. And for the first time, Alex felt like he was part of something truly extraordinary. Cliffhanger. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the entrance to the chamber. The hunters had arrived. The battle for survival was about to reach its peak. The crash came from the entrance to the chamber, a loud, bone-rattling sound that shook the walls. Alex's heart pounded as he spun toward the source. The sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, echoed through the chamber. They were here. "Colin," Alex whispered, his voice tight with fear. "They found us." Colin's face darkened, but there was no panic in his eyes. He turned to Sarah, who was still working at the control panel, her fingers moving swiftly over the glowing symbols. "Keep working. I'll hold them off," Colin said, his voice steady, almost calm. Sarah looked up, her expression fierce. "Don't be a hero, Colin. We need you here." But Colin was already moving toward the entrance, his powerful form casting a long shadow across the chamber. "You can finish this. I trust you," he said. Alex watched in awe as Colin, his glowing eyes focused, walked toward the entrance. He was ready to face whatever came through that door. And Alex knew he had to do something. He couldn't just stand there. "I'm coming with you," Alex said, his voice more confident than he felt. He couldn't let Colin fight alone, not after everything they had been through. Colin turned, a brief look of surprise flashing across his face. But then he nodded. "Stay close and be ready." The sound of the footsteps grew louder, each step closer than the last. Alex could see the faint glow of the hunters' helmets through the crack in the door. They were getting closer, and there was no time to waste. "Get ready," Colin said, stepping into a defensive stance. "They won't give up easily." The door suddenly burst open with a loud bang. 3 heavily armored hunters stood in the doorway, their red eyes glowing ominously. They were bigger, more menacing than the last ones, and they had come prepared. Weapons in hand, they strode into the chamber with a slow, deliberate confidence. "Colin," the leader of the hunters growled, his voice low and threatening. "You've run far enough. This is the end." Colin's eyes never left the leader, his stance unwavering. "You won't win. Not today." Without warning, the hunters fired. The blasts came fast and fierce, hitting the ground where Colin had been standing just moments before. He moved with lightning speed, dodging the shots and closing the distance between them in a blink. Alex's pulse raced as he watched the action unfold. Colin fought with incredible precision, his movements graceful but lethal. He disarmed one of the hunters, sending the weapon flying across the room. Another hunter fired at him, but Colin was already behind him, using the hunter's own momentum to throw him to the ground. But there were 3 of them, and the odds were against Colin. Alex's eyes darted to the control panel. Sarah was still working furiously, but the hunter's presence was making it difficult for her to focus. He had to do something, anything, to help. He grabbed a nearby weapon, a small energy blaster, and ran toward the battle. As he neared the hunters, he took a deep breath, steadying his hand. He aimed and fired, sending a bolt of energy toward one of the hunters. The shot hit its target, knocking the hunter off balance. Colin took advantage of the opening, quickly incapacitating the hunter with a swift strike. 2 down, 1 to go. The leader of the hunters snarled, his eyes burning with rage. "You think this will stop us?" he spat. "We'll find you. Always." Colin stood tall, his eyes locked on the leader. "Not if we stop you first." With a powerful leap, Colin surged forward, knocking the leader's weapon aside and engaging him in hand-to-hand combat. The two clashed, their movements blurring as they fought for dominance. Alex's breath caught in his throat. He had no idea how to help in this fight, but watching Callan face the leader with such determination made him realize something important. He wasn't alone anymore. He was part of this fight, part of something bigger than himself. Sarah's voice cut through the tension. "I've almost got it. Just keep them distracted a little longer." Alex nodded, turning his attention back to Callan and the remaining hunter. He fired again, this time hitting the hunter's weapon and sending it skidding across the floor. The hunter lunged for him, but Alex managed to dodge, his heart racing with fear and excitement. Callan delivered a final, decisive blow to the leader, knocking him out cold. The remaining hunter hesitated, clearly weighing his options, but it was too late. "We're done here," Callan said, breathing heavily. "We need to move now." Cliffhanger. The ground trembled beneath them. A low rumble filled the air as the entire chamber seemed to shake. Alex looked up, his eyes widening in horror. The real threat was just beginning. The ground trembled again, harder this time. Alex stumbled, his feet slipping on the rocky floor as a deep rumble shook the chamber. The walls seemed to sway, and dust fell from the ceiling in thick clumps. Something was happening, something that didn't feel right. Callan's eyes widened, his hand reaching out to steady Alex. "It's them," he said, his voice tense. "They've triggered the self-destruct sequence. We need to leave now." Alex's heart pounded. He had no idea what was happening, but the urgency in Callan's voice told him everything he needed to know. The situation had gone from bad to worse in a heartbeat. They had to get out, and fast. "Callan." Sarah's voice broke through the chaos. She had finally finished her work at the control panel, but she didn't look relieved. "It's too late. The entire facility is going to collapse. We've got minutes, maybe less." Alex's blood ran cold. "Where do we go?" he asked, his mind racing. "How do we get out of here?" "The ship," Callan said immediately. "We can still make it to the ship. It's the only way out." Without another word, they ran. The path to the ship felt longer than it had before, the walls of the cave closing in around them as the tremors grew stronger. The ground beneath their feet cracked open in places, and the sound of distant explosions echoed through the chamber. Time was running out. "Stay close," Callan called over his shoulder, his voice barely audible over the growing noise. "The ship's just ahead." They rounded the corner, and there it was, the sleek, dark form of Callan's ship. But something was wrong. The ship was surrounded by the same hunters they had fought earlier. At least a dozen of them, their red eyes glowing in the dim light, were setting up weapons and preparing for a final assault. Sarah cursed under her breath. "They've got us surrounded." Callan didn't hesitate. He took a deep breath, his golden eyes locking onto the hunters. "We'll fight our way out. Stay close, and don't look back." Alex's pulse raced. He had no weapons, no combat training, but the fear and adrenaline pushed him forward. He wasn't about to let Callan and Sarah face this alone. They had brought him this far. Now he had to stand beside them. The first shot rang out, blazing bright in the dark. Callan moved with lightning speed, his form a blur as he ducked and weaved between blasts. He took down the first few hunters with swift, precise movements, using their own weapons against them. Sarah followed close behind, firing her blaster with deadly accuracy. She took out 2 more hunters, her face set in determination. But there were too many. The remaining hunters began to regroup, advancing toward them. Callan's face was set with grim resolve. He fought like a force of nature, but even he couldn't hold them off forever. Alex's mind raced. There had to be something he could do. He couldn't just watch as Callan and Sarah fought for their lives. Then he remembered the device Sarah had used earlier, the one that had temporarily scrambled the hunters' tracking systems. Maybe, just maybe, it could help. He darted to the side, slipping behind a rock outcrop. With shaking hands, Alex fumbled for the device in his bag. He wasn't sure how it worked, but he knew it was their only shot. "Colin," Alex yelled, his voice breaking through the chaos. "I think I can help." Colin barely glanced in his direction, but the brief look of acknowledgement was enough. "Do it, Alex." Alex pressed the device's buttons, praying it would work. A low hum filled the air as the device activated. A bright pulse of energy shot out, enveloping the hunters' weapons in a shimmering field. The hunters faltered, confused, their weapons sparking and malfunctioning. It was only a brief distraction, but it was enough. "Now," Colin shouted, leaping forward with lightning speed. He took down 2 hunters in a blur of motion. Sarah, seeing the opportunity, opened fire again, hitting one of the last hunters square in the chest. In the chaos, the remaining hunters hesitated, their weapons useless. Colin and Sarah made their way toward the ship, pushing forward with relentless determination. Alex followed, his heart racing with every step. They'd reached the ship's hatch, and Colin quickly activated the controls. The door slid open, and they rushed inside, barely escaping as the hatch sealed behind them. Colin's voice was steady but full of urgency. "We're not out of the woods yet. Get to the cockpit. We need to take off. Now."